Class is in session, so get your fucking notebooks out. Hello, this is my first mastery class. We're going to talk about cardio today. This is such a trendy topic right now. I wouldn't say necessarily cardio in general, but I have been seeing a lot more of social media talking about hybrid training or hybrid athletes, and everyone wants to look exactly like their favorite hybrid athlete. So I think cardio is such an important topic to know how to implement, right? When to do it, why to do it, and how to use it effectively in maybe a fat loss phase, for example. So let's get into it. Why do we do cardio? Obviously, there's a ton of health benefits to it, and that is not really the focus of this video, but I do think it's worth mentioning. We have blood pressure regulation, glucose management, nutrient partitioning. That's just when blood flow gets nutrients to where they need to go. And then mood enhancements. So great benefits. And then we also have body composition benefits, and finally something we care about, right? But this can help create more of a calorie deficit when paired with proper nutritional tracking, okay? Because I did mention the calorie deficit, it is important to go over this in more detail, assuming that this image with these little scales will come up numerous times throughout these mastery classes. You've probably heard of energy balance, the rule of thermodynamics. I think it's especially an important topic to drive home. Energy balance refers to the equilibrium between the amount of energy or calories consumed through food and beverages on a daily basis, right? And the amount of energy expended by the body to maintain its basic physiological functions and physical activity levels, known as TDEE, or total daily energy expenditure. And if you've already heard of all this and you're like, hey, when we're talking about cardio, we're going to get there. This sets me up. I'll tie it into a cute little bow. It'll all make sense. But I think this is an important topic to really understand before we get a little bit deeper. So let's talk about these three scales now. So an energy intake, or calories eaten, matches the energy expenditure, or also known as that total daily energy expenditure. It results in a state of energy balance, okay? It's equal. If your intake, calories eaten, beverages consumed, if your intake exceeds the expenditure, it leads to a positive energy balance, resulting in weight gain. While if your total daily energy expenditure exceeds the intake, it leads to a negative energy balance, resulting in weight loss. And before I even get into more of this weight loss and cardio and dive deeper into this, I do want to give a disclaimer, because I know people think to use cardio for weight loss, but you do want to be living most of your life in maintenance. So remember that, and use cutting phases, these dieting phases, muscle building phases for a time period to achieve the results you want. Okay. Each phase, including fat loss phase, has time constraints for a good reason. The best results will come when you finally accept the narrative that eating enough and being in maintenance is just as important as being in a dieting phase. And I'll say this right now, if you're constantly trying to lose weight and eat as little as possible, you're not doing your body any favors. And I can assure you that you're making it harder for yourself. Okay. Stay tuned for another mastery classes where I really dive into fat loss phases, because that's not necessarily what we're talking about today. We're talking about cardio, and maybe you just love cardio and you want to figure out how to put cardio in with your weight training. Stay with me. We'll get there. All right. So considerations for cardio. Cardio can, more than likely, definitely, absolutely, increase hunger. This is why tracking nutrition in some way while you're doing this cardio is also important, preferably macro tracking. If you don't do some sort of nutritional tracking, there is a strong chance that you make up for extra cardio that you're doing anyways by simply just eating a bit more because of those hunger cues. So taking you from what you thought was a deficit to a maintenance, or perhaps even a surplus. And another thing to consider is cardio can downregulate NEAT, non-exercise activity, okay, which is the energy it takes to do all of your exercise related activities, such as talking with your hands like I'm doing, tapping your foot, walking around, texting. So this NEAT, remember, is part of that total daily expenditure equation from this little cute little graph we have here. Looking at what makes up that total daily expenditure, you'll notice that the actual exercise, or that EAT, plays the lowest role in overall daily expenditure. Only 5% of that is part of the energy equation, okay? And when people overdo this cardio, sure, you might be increasing your exercise, right? But you're then decreasing your NEAT, so the overall net energy can actually be less. All right, so preferably, now you're like, what do I do? Like, so what, how do I lose weight? I'm using cardio to lose weight. Now what? So preferably, and this is how I focus on it with my clients in particular, but in a fat loss phase, you focus on a calorie deficit to drive the fat loss. And I do believe most coaches would agree with me. You focus on a calorie deficit to drive the fat loss over movement, okay? If you try to make up for a poor calorie deficit by increasing cardio, it doesn't have the same effects as far as fat reduction. Those two are not interchangeable. Yes, you still want to prioritize lifting weights to maintain muscle tissue. So when you're back into a maintenance phase, your metabolism is still operating optimally and you can eat more. Okay, that is so important. And I know most of you are like, well, I'm trying to get toned. I'm trying to get lean. Guess what? That is what we're talking about here. Okay. You're trying to lose fat and keep as much muscle as you can, right? So that is meaning we need to prioritize the lifting weights over cardio. Cardio will never make up for a poor diet. Period. Kind of to drive home this slide here, I was going to present this little research study. Obviously, there's a lot of meta-analyses of this research, but one study in particular talked about 3 different groups. So the first group was put into a calorie deficit only for weight loss. The second group was a calorie deficit and cardio. Okay, that was the second group. And the third group was a calorie deficit and a weightlifting group. Out of all 3 groups after the time period, they did all lose the same body weight, but the weightlifting group lost far more fat. So like I mentioned before, weight loss and fat loss is different. Weight loss is just overall weight. Could be water weight, could be muscle. But fat loss, you want to be losing fat, keeping muscle for so many reasons. If you're like, I want to look like small and petite and like that's what's in, I want to do this. That's your answer. You want to lose fat and keep the muscle that you currently have. So I do believe, even without you knowing, whether you know it or not, you're trying your best to prioritize muscle and keep the muscle that you've built while you're losing fat. Okay? So I think that sometimes it's freeing to hear all that. At least it was for me when I learned this information, because I was like, oh my God, I'm doing so much cardio. Like, what's going on? Why don't I look like the girl on Instagram who's doing her hydrox training or is a hybrid athlete? It's just nice to know that you're not tied to cardio to hit your goals. And I think that is very freeing to know. You're not tied to cardio. It is just a tool. So let's bust some myths. Cardio will not magically make you burn fat. It adds a bit to your deficit, and that's it. Cardio is non-essential for fat loss. Like I said before, this cardio isn't a way to make up for what you ate. Using cardio to burn off the calories you ate is not only a poor mindset that can lead to negative relationships with food and exercise, but it's also just not realistic. It won't burn fat in specific spots. Where you store fat is 99.9999999% genetic. Doing cardio won't make you burn your hip fat or lower belly fat. In general, this is genetic on where you carry your fat. It also won't make you toned. Being toned is a matter of having muscle and being lean. Outside of adding to a deficit, cardio plays absolutely no part in that. And then the last myth, I kind of mentioned this before, but this will not give you the body of your favorite hybrid or CrossFit athlete. The body that they have is partly due to their hard work, but part of it is also genetic. Bodies that look like theirs tend to be good at hybrid sports, so they end up doing it professionally. Doing a bunch of intense cardio and hybrid workouts won't make you look like that. And sometimes it's like, what the hell? But why not? Because in reality, the people that naturally look more like that tend to be good at it, so they pick it up and they stick to it. All right, some cons of cardio. It can drive stress and inflammation if overdone. Overdoing cardio is a huge physical and potentially psychological stressor. That stress can cause poor sleep, shift weight loss to muscle rather than fat. And remember, we want to keep the muscle, and counteract all of the great benefits of that muscle retention. So making sure your metabolism is optimal, right? Healthy bone density, healthy hormones, healthy thyroid, all the good stuff. And chronic stress leads to inflammation, is bad for health. Okay. Interference with resistance training is also another con. So cardio does create some level of interference with your resistance training or lifting. We all have a limited amount of resources that were available to adapt and recover from exercise. So a common analogy is that we have like this recovery battery. Strength training and cardio both pull from the same battery. Okay. So doing low intensity cardio, maybe like, I don't know, 30 minutes here and there throughout the week probably isn't going to drain the battery a whole lot, but doing an hour or more of an intense HIIT workout every single day of the week is definitely going to suck that battery energy way lower. And you need that energy and that recovery battery to be there for your strength training sessions. And timing does also matter. So doing cardio directly before or after a training can cause more interference. So keep that in mind too. So let's talk about specific recommendations of what we do about it. The number one consideration is to prioritize cardio or weight training based on your goals. And if you want to run a marathon and maybe you're trying to up your mile pace of some sort, maybe resistance training is going to be put on the back burner for you. But if you want all the benefits and the body composition, where you're toned, long, lean, whatever those goals are, you do want to put resistance training on the forefront. So if your goal is to lose fat and build muscle, your resistance training will come first. Since most of our audience is probably in that second camp, we'll focus on prioritizing resistance training, but you could use the same principle that I'm about to share to prioritize sport-specific sessions if you are training for a sport or a race or an event. Do you love how like I'm like trying to be casual on like what my opinion is, but like obviously really not? Okay, so guidelines: split up your cardio and resistance training by at least 4 hours if possible. If you don't have time to do the separate sessions, start with the resistance training and end with the cardio. Okay. Consider low impact forms of cardio like walking, biking, elliptical, swimming, etc. instead of the high impact, high intensity like running, jumping, interval sprinting. Having this just, it just is a little bit more of a higher recovery demand. Keep sessions away from your leg days as much as possible, since that is the muscle group that will likely interfere with, especially those high impact intensity choices. So if you do like doing HIIT workouts, I mean, sure, do them like once or twice a week, but try to do it with at least one day after and one day before your leg day workouts. Okay, so now, if you want actual guidelines, this is my opinion and my general guidelines and how I like to go about my phases. But so depending on what phase you're in your nutritional periodization, which will be a whole nother class, muscle building, 8 to 10K steps a day just to support the cardiovascular health. If you're in a fat loss phase, you're going to start with the calorie deficit and maybe add 2,000 steps to your usual average. So let's say you're not quite at that 8 to 10K steps. Let's say you normally get like 5,000 steps a day. 10K steps, by the way, is really an arbitrary number. If you're usually at 5,000 steps and you need to get into a deficit by doing a calorie deficit and maybe adding 2,000 steps, now you're in a calorie deficit and just having 7,000 steps a day, you will lose weight, okay? But there is a chance that you would plateau. And then you're going to want to add some of that list cardio in, starting on the lower end, working your way up as you need, as your fat loss phase goes on. Again, there's a timeline, there's an ending phase. And I know we're not talking about fat loss in general in this guide, but I just know it's on top of people's minds. Summer's coming around. And I know that a lot of women just overdo that fat loss phase. So sometimes I just throw little nuggets in there. But once you plateau, you're going to add 60 to 200 minutes of list cardio a week, starting on the lower end. And if you're in a maintenance phase, we love that for you. 8 to 10K steps a day. And then just do your fun cardio. Maybe you like dancing. Maybe you want to join some sports. Maybe you love swimming, running. And obviously adjustments can be made on individual preferences, goals, and responses to cardio training. All right, lastly, just don't overthink it. If you do really enjoy cardio, do it up, shouty. Okay, do it up. If you feel good and you can still push your lifts, you can still push those lifts and you're still progressing with plenty of energy, you're probably in a good spot. If you're doing a bunch of cardio and your resistance training is suffering and you're noticing you're not being able to progressive overload, you may want to consider lowering the total volume of cardio and maybe moving it to a lower impact or lower intensity type of cardio. There's a lot of info out there, and I know that, and it can be very overwhelming, but just don't miss the forest, okay? By focusing on the trees. You're doing great. Thanks so much for listening. If you're interested in joining my online training program, you could go to basilbysoph.com if you are already in my training program, and let me know if you have any questions.